Howdy readers, I'm Jason. This is Chapter and Verse, and this is my video on Coriolanus for Shaketember 2022. I finished the play about a week and a half ago and have been just doing my best to order my thoughts since then. I'm not 100% sure where to start with this. I know what I want to spend most of my time on in this, but let me just start by saying this was my first time reading this play. I've never seen it performed live. I've never seen the Ralph Fiennes film. And so I was coming to it pretty blind. I had really no idea what it was about. And the thing that struck me most about this play, and it took me a little while to realize that's what was going on, was that this play is rife with ambiguity. It's absolutely rife with ambiguity. So we have Coriolanus, right, the main character, who's this like war general, and he's like what's the actor Matt Smith in House of the Dragon. He's like Matt Smith at the end of episode 3 of House of the Dragon, where he single-handedly basically like kicks an entire army's ass. Even though for 6 months prior to that, he and his army hadn't been able to sort of get a foothold against this army. But yeah, I mean, he gets pissed because his brother wants to send him some help, and he's offended by that, and so all of a sudden he becomes Thor or something, and it was just absolutely ridiculous when I stopped watching the show. But Coriolanus is a little bit like that, right? I mean, he just wins, right? He just, like, whatever battle he goes into, he just wins. And, and everybody else, all of the lackeys and the kiss asses, everybody just looks up to him for that. Even though he's a jerk, right? So Coriolanus is an asshole. And here's the thing, right? So from the very beginning of the play, and the play begins with a lot of energy, right? There is a kind of march going on, a deeply upset citizenry, and who feel put upon and feel wronged by the state, etc., etc., and they are rallying, and so it's really moving from the very beginning, and then Coriolanus steps onto the stage, and he's just a jerk. He's just an absolute asshole to these people who are enduring various struggles, and so from the very beginning I was like, all right, so Shakespeare seems to have sympathy for the common man here. He's painting Coriolanus as just a real insensitive prick, and and throughout the play, I mean, like, this goes on, right? So even like all of Coriolanus's success in battle, right? I mean, he's got these moments, right? So this is in Act 1, Scene 4. We're looking at line 39 and 40. And again, I have no idea if this is going to be the same in other editions of the play. This is the Folger. But I'm noticing that some of these editions are numbering the lines differently. So take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, so he's getting ready to charge in here in the middle of a battle. They're fighting the Volsces, and he says, "Come on, my fellows! He that retires, I'll take him for a Volscy, and he shall feel mine edge." So okay, you want your men to follow you into battle, etc., etc. I'm of the view that the best way to do that is probably not to threaten them with death if they don't. So the guy's just got too much swagger, right? There's just too much bravado. It's performative. All of this stuff has less to do. All of his action in battle has less to do with him winning a war or winning a skirmish for his city, for his government, for his people, than it does with him being able to kind of show off his skills and show everybody that he's just a monster stud. That's what it seems to have to do with. He seems to resemble Donald Trump, in my opinion, in many ways. He is given to mockery of the people that he is meant to kind of look after and represent. He feels contempt for them. There is, so some of the people who are following him recognize that he is mocking them. But there's just something just kind of acidic and nasty about him with respect to them. And the citizens are talking about it at one point. It's in Act 2, Scene 3. And one of the citizens just says, no, 'tis his kind of speech. He did not mock us. And again, right, like that reminds me of Donald Trump, right? When followers of his on the campaign trail, et cetera, he would say these absolutely outlandish, vile things, and they would be like, oh, he didn't mean anything by it. That's just his way. That's just how he is. It's just how he talks. It's just locker room talk. So it's the same kind of thing going on, right? Like his followers, Coriolanus' followers, seem to me to be gullible. Or just, I mean, it's easy for them to kind of have the wool pulled over their eyes. And that's unfortunate. To the point of his bravado, this performative bravado. I had $1 for every time in the play he is talking about how much blood he shed, or his mom is talking about how much blood he shed. She's so proud, right? Like, oh, my son sheds more blood than anyone else. Yeah, like it's all about puffing himself up or puffing her son up. And yeah, and then of course there's the lack of humility, right? So let's zip forward to Act 5, Scene 6. Yeah, we have Aufidius and his conspirators talking. And a third conspirator says, Sir, his stoutness when he did stand for consul, which he lost by lack of stooping. He lost by a lack of humility, right? He's arrogant. He feels entitled to promotion. And these are just really despicable character traits. All of these are despicable character traits. However, by the end of the play, Shakespeare seems to want us to sympathize with him. And yeah, so again, right, like, I know this has been a long digression, but there's just a lot of ambiguity. We're never quite sure how we're meant to feel about Coriolanus. Which is not the case really in most of other Shakespeare's work, right? I mean, okay, so yeah, Hamlet does and says some kind of asshole things, but like it's pretty clear from the beginning that we're supposed to be in Hamlet's corner. That's not the case with Coriolanus, which is interesting, right? It's really interesting that Shakespeare would, avoid kind of leading us down this particular path or that particular path. And just kind of leave the conversation maybe a bit more open. Which brings me to the main thing that I want to talk about in this. Okay, so while reading the play in Act 3, Scene 1, right, roundabouts line 337, I read this in a stage direction, right? Enter Brutus and Sicinius with the rabble again. Now, I read that and was really, really struck by the fact that Shakespeare, in a stage direction, was referring to the people, was referring to the citizenry as rabble, right? Which is a contemptuous word in the play. It's a contemptuous word today, right? When later in the play, Volumnia, Coriolanus' mother, uses the word, let's see here, Brutus says, I would he had. Volumnia says, I would he had. 'Twas you incensed the rabble, cats that can judge as fitly of his worth as I can of those mysteries which heaven will not have earth to know. Right? And so we look, cats, term of contempt, right? So she thinks of the people in a really, really condescending way, as does Coriolanus. Coriolanus refers to them as rabble, I believe, twice. But returning to Shakespeare's use of it in that line, the stage direction is in his voice, okay? Is the reference suggesting contempt for the people in Shakespeare himself? That Shakespeare himself is allowing his own attitude, his own opinion, to kind of smuggle its way into the text? Now here's the thing. So as I was reading the play, I thought this was the first instance where I had seen the word appearing in a stage direction. But that's actually not the case. So the line where Volumnia refers to the crowds as rabble. I remember that she had done that, but I hadn't marked it. I didn't know where it was. And so I said, okay, I need to find where that was. And so I got online and I just Googled Coriolanus and rabble and, thought, well, I'll see what this turns up. And I found this really interesting article. So this is from the Bill Shakespeare Project. It's a blog, I think. It's written in 2017, this piece. It's called Coriolanus, a Sword Pool at the Point of No Return. So I'm reading this article, and it tells the reader that the word rabble appears in the play in dialogue 3 times, 2 by Martius or Coriolanus, 1 by his mother Volumnia. So I said, okay, well, I'm not really worried about that. What interested me, though, is that it appears in stage directions, it says here, 2 times. And I was like, 2 times? I only remember the 1 time. And let me just read to you what the writer of this piece wrote right here. He says, I know I'm not supposed to look too much at stage direction in Shakespeare, which seems more editorial than compositional, but here I'm going to make an exception. The first time rabble is used in stage direction, it comes after the tribune Sicinius cries out, "Help ye citizens." The stage direction that follows reads, "Enter a rabble of plebeians with the aediles." They are a rabble, quote, the lowest class of people, the section of the population which is regarded as socially inferior, uncouth, or disorderly, the mob. That's from the OED. And later in the scene, when Brutus, and the second one is the one that I thought was the only one, right? I noticed it when I was reading it, and I thought it was the only example. And later in the scene, when Brutus and Sicinius lead them back on stage, they're described as, quote, the rabble again. In each case, they are led by the tribunes, and I know if I should treat stage direction with care, discretion, and skepticism, then case in stage direction should be doubly dubious. But that said, in both instances, rabble is with the lowercase r. Let's see here. However, when the crowd is pushed back after Martius draws his sword, they are described as the people. Note the capitalization, capital P. Even later, when they enter the scene after learning that Martius has joined with Aufidius and now threatens Rome, they are described as a troop of citizens, capital T, capital C. I just find it interesting, this is the writer of the article, not me. I just find it interesting that when they are under the influence of their leaders, the tribunes, they're a rabble. When they act upon their own volition, they are the people and a troop of citizens. So here's what I find interesting. I find it interesting that the writer of this piece was looking at the use of the word to describe them when they are under the influence of their leaders, right, their politicians, and that they're described in a different way when they're acting, when they seem to have more agency. So yeah, okay, so that's fascinating. But what fascinates me about these 2 instances of stage direction is that in the first one, okay, the first one that appears, not the first one I noticed, the first one that I missed or that I overlooked, okay, which is right around Act 3, Scene 1, line 228 or so. The stage direction is enter a rabble of plebeians with the aediles. And then just a few pages later, Act 3, Scene 1, around, line 337, enter Brutus and Sicinius with the rabble. again. Now, what I find fascinating is that in the first instance, he describes them as a rabble. Okay, so it's an indefinite article, right? And so as a result, and I think this is why I didn't notice it, rabble seems in this usage with the indefinite article before it, it seems to be like a synonym for a crowd or a group, right? Some kind of benign kind of collective noun. But then in the second instance, right, just a little bit later in that scene, enter Brutus and Sicinius with the rabble. Again, the fact that Shakespeare then goes to a definite article with the instead of a. Now it could just be that, that the is making it clear that he's, referring to the specific rabble that he had been indefinite or imprecise or more general about earlier. But for me, when I see that, when I read that, when I think about it even now, the use of the definite article, the, suggests ownership of the idea by Shakespeare. It suggests ownership of the word, right? He's not just using the word to describe something, he's using the word to pass judgment on something or someone. And I find that just incredibly fascinating, because if that's true, if that's the case, it's got to be one of the only instances in Shakespeare's plays where we have Shakespeare's voice somehow interjected in the action. We have Shakespeare's opinions about crowds, about people who are kind of worked up into a lather. We have his opinion on who they are, what they represent, how to think about them, knitting its way into the text, right? So it becomes, in that moment, it becomes less about story and more about Shakespeare's judgment of these people. And I just found that just incredibly interesting. And again, it's just another example of the ambiguity, right? At the beginning of the play, it feels like we are meant to sympathize with the crowds and what they're going through. But at this point, if he's using the to undermine, whether consciously or not, and it's probably unconsciously, to undermine the idea that we're meant to have sympathy with these people, and that we should instead be standing apart from them, turning up our nose at them, condemning them. I don't know, it's another example of this really strange ambiguity in the play, of Shakespeare refusing to make things easy for us in terms of where our compass should be pointing, if that makes any sense. So that was the thing I found really, really fascinating about the play, was the ambiguity throughout and how we're meant to think about Coriolanus. I come down on the side of he's just a total asshole. Other people are more sympathetic to him. How we're meant to think about the crowds, I'm sympathetic with the crowds and how they are treated with such disdain by Coriolanus, how they are to some degree manipulated by their leaders, right? Even though their leaders, they have good reason to do it. They're not lying about how Coriolanus is treating these people. They're not lying about that. They're just making these people aware of it and then hoping that they will somehow tip the scales in the other direction and therefore give them a little bit more power. But yeah, so it's a really interesting play. It's a really fascinating play, a troubling play. It's like a very timely play in terms of its portrait of political kind of machination and scorn and the way in which politicians are constantly thinking more about themselves than they are about the people that they're meant to be taking care of or speaking on behalf of. So anyway, but yeah, for me, it all comes down to the most interesting thing. Who saw this coming? The the most interesting thing about the play is the indefinite article in a stage direction versus the definite article in a stage direction just a little bit later in the same scene. And what the use of those two words, a and the, indicate about how Shakespeare himself feels about his subject. And yeah, that's cool, man. That article from the Bill Shakespeare Project, I think it was called, also says that the word rabble is used in a stage direction in Hamlet as well. And so I'm going to be on the lookout for that next time I read Hamlet. But let me know what you think about my thoughts on Coriolanus. Let me know what your own thoughts are about Coriolanus if you've read it, whether it was for Shaketember this year or at some point in the past. This is not a play that is widely done. It's not a play that is widely taught. And so I have reason to believe it's not a play that is widely read. But it's definitely a play worth your time if you haven't read it. So consider picking it up. I suspect Kelly and I will probably rent the Ralph Fiennes film at some point soon. It's unfortunate that Jessica Chastain, she plays Coriolanus' wife. I can talk about a thankless role, man. Like, the character has shit all to do on the page. So it'll be interesting to see if Ralph Fiennes, just through the staging of it in the film, is able to kind of come up with more for her to do. Maybe he gives some of the mother's lines to the wife. That would be interesting. But anyhow, that's Coriolanus, and I'm almost done reading A Midsummer Night's Dream, and so at some point before too long, look for a video on A Midsummer Night's Dream from me. I apologize again that Shaketember as an event kind of went off the rails as far as like the schedule was concerned for all three of us hosts. But I do want to thank all of you who have been participating. You guys, at least as much as the hosts, make this event what it is and make it incredibly special. And it's your participation, I think, that reminds people more than anything else during the month of September that Shakespeare is intimidating, but that there's no need to be intimidated by it. So anyway, thank you guys again for participating. Let me know what you think below, and I will talk to you guys again very soon. Adios.